Rick and Morty is one of those shows that blends absurd comedy with some surprisingly deep concepts in ways that honestly I've not seen many shows do before. It also is remarkably smart and clearly has a lot of heart put into it, well, at least sometimes. But of course, all that gets overshadowed by the memes, I mean, Pickle Rick, am I right? But still, I think that overall, it's a very interesting take on science fiction, while also being pretty funny at times. This show is about a lot of things, but mostly it's about Rick, a dad who left to buy the milk and actually returned, except as an old alcoholic man. Season 8 of Rick and Morty is coming out quite soon, so I figured this would be a good time for us to discuss and hopefully answer one of the oldest mysteries in the show that people have been wondering about ever since the first season came out. That being, what is Rick's intellectual quotient, or IQ? But before we actually answer this question, we first need to actually understand what IQ really is and what it measures. Because believe it or not, you can't really condense a person's entire mind into a magical number that supposedly represents the entirety of their intelligence. A more accurate description of what IQ really is would be something along the lines of the ability of someone to use their logic and reasoning to solve problems or answer questions. In other words, IQ measures problem-solving ability more than knowledge itself. This basically means that theoretically you could have all the knowledge in the universe and your IQ could still be average, which would basically mean that while you do have all this knowledge and information, you might still struggle to use what you know to find solutions to new problems. On the other hand, someone with a high IQ, even if they don't know anything, will often be able to use reasoning and thinking to come up with creative solutions. Applying this to Rick, we can see that this description of high IQ fits him perfectly, as he is an extremely skilled scientist who is far above anyone else, not just in the world but in the entire universe. He is able to easily create machines and other inventions that today's best engineers could not even think of. Also, his intellect isn't just limited to the scope of his own universe, as he has proven to be outstandingly smart even when compared to most other Ricks in the multiverse. So, how can we actually measure IQ? Well, the most common way is by taking a standardized test. These tests are designed by psychologists and they don't measure knowledge or creativity, but instead evaluate skills like pattern recognition, verbal comprehension, and memory. The reason evaluating people this way is effective is that what they're being tested on doesn't really require background knowledge, which, as we've discussed, doesn't impact a person's IQ. After taking the test, your score is compared to a large group of people and converted into a standardized number. This is your IQ. The way this is designed is that the average score from all the people that have taken the test is made to be 100, and your score is evaluated in relation to that. For example, if the average score in the test is 50 and you get a 60, that means your IQ is 20% larger than the average person. And since the average IQ is set as 100, that means your IQ would be 120. Most people score somewhere between 85 and 115. This system results in a fairly accurate measure of certain cognitive abilities like problem solving and logical reasoning. Your measured IQ can give a pretty good sense of how you think in certain situations, and in most cases, it remains the same throughout a person's life. However, IQ doesn't give you the full picture of someone's intelligence as, because of the way that it's measured, it fails to account for creativity, emotional intelligence, motivation, discipline, and social skills, just to name a few. Which, if you've watched the show, you'll have noticed that these are the areas that Rick is the most lacking in. And while this isn't that kind of character analysis video, as far as I understood, that's the entire point of Rick's character arc in the series, isn't it? He's basically a god thanks to his intelligence and resourcefulness, but he is an emotional mess. So while IQ can be useful to understand some aspects of mental ability, it definitely doesn't define your intelligence or potential as a whole. And besides, if your IQ score was your primary source of validation, that really just means you lack actual achievements. But anyways, based on this, if it wasn't obvious already, Rick's IQ is gonna be incredibly high. This is a problem because when it comes to IQ tests, there are limitations when accurately measuring very high scores. Most tests lose precision when a person's IQ gets past a certain point, usually around 145. So what some tests will do is that instead of giving you an actual score, they'll just say something along the lines of 145 or higher, because very intelligent people might be able to get all questions right, which makes it hard to differentiate between their scores. It's like the classic scenario where you get a 100 on a test and your friend gets a 97 and he says, "Oh, we got basically the same thing, we must be pretty equal in ability," and you respond, "You got 97 because that's all you could get. I got 100 because that's all there was to get." So someone with 150 IQ and someone with 200 IQ might have both gotten all the questions right and thus the same score on their tests. So about Rick, it's very unlikely that he would be willing to take the IQ test, and even if he did, he probably wouldn't take it seriously. And even if we were to say that it's a Rick from an alternate universe who is extremely determined to try his best, he wouldn't get an accurate measure from any test made by normal humans, so he'd probably have to make an extremely high level test himself for himself, or create a robot to make the test for him. And honestly, if he's gonna be inventing things to measure his own IQ, it's probably a waste of time for him to make tests or anything like that, because he'll be able to measure his own IQ with a brain scanner or something probably. But of course, it's impossible for us to determine what result he would get. So instead, we're gonna have to estimate ourselves. But first, let's see how the IQs of some of the smartest people in history were tested. There isn't really a consensus on who the smartest person of all time was, and the title of highest IQ ever is heavily debated, with a lot of names being thrown around, some of the most famous being the likes of Nikola Tesla, Shakespeare, and even Garry Kasparov. However, the people I'll be taking a look at are Marilyn Vos Savant and William James Sidis, both of whom are some of the people whose names most frequently come up when discussing the highest IQs ever. First, Marilyn Vos Savant is an American magazine author who became widely known for breaking the Guinness World Record for having the highest IQ ever. The record doesn't exist anymore, but she allegedly has an IQ of 228. That's 68 points more than Albert Einstein's estimated IQ. She took one of the earlier IQ tests as a child and was found to have a mental age much higher than her actual age. However, take this with a grain of salt, as her score was measured a while ago by tests that are now outdated. Modern IQ tests generally don't ever go as high as 200, let alone 228. As for William James Sidis, he was a child prodigy born in New York City. He allegedly had an IQ of between 250 and 300, which would make him the most intelligent person ever. But this is more of an estimate than anything, as there isn't really any concrete evidence of him taking a standardized IQ test. And even if he did, the tests of his time were a lot less accurate, especially when dealing with geniuses like him. So his IQ is probably still very high, but this is too much. So basically, while these people are undeniably some of the smartest to have ever lived, their IQ score shouldn't be taken as precise, as IQ at these levels starts to fail, and it becomes less about the number and more about the intellectual achievements of these people. But still, I will try and give you guys the best possible estimate. It's just important that you understand that with IQ, the bigger it gets, the less it means. So, while Rick is a fictional character, and obviously far above any human that has ever lived in terms of intelligence, we can still try to apply real-world logic to measure his IQ. So, let's take a look at his feats, starting with his technological genius. Rick built a working portal gun that allows travel between universes, something that, if possible, would require an unheard of mastery of quantum mechanics, multidimensional theory, and energy. Rick has also created perfect clones, mind control devices, AIs that have clearly passed the singularity, interdimensional cable boxes, spacecrafts made of trash, and even a small universe just to simply use as his car battery, making him evidently have off-the-charts problem-solving, engineering, and conceptual thinking skills. Additionally, he is a master of virtually every science there has ever been, and probably some others that don't exist yet. He has designed bioweapons, cures, all sorts of weird drugs, and all kinds of organisms in seconds. As for his memory and ability to recall information, he is able to instantly remember niche specific data, plan schemes that require dozens of things going right across different realities, and he is capable of complex improvising, even when under pressure, showing that he has an extremely accurate and consistent memory. Rick is also capable of anticipating or predicting people's actions, outsmarting entire sci-fi organizations, and discovering new elements for fun. He also fought Obama and won. Given all this, Rick's IQ is evidently some outrageously high number, definitely in the thousands. Not even if the world's best ever geniuses and Nobel Prize winners all work together, could they achieve what this man literally does in his sleep. I mean, this man is challenged by virtually no one except for other versions of himself, which is why I find Rick Sanchez's IQ to be somewhere around 4,000 or even more, a number astronomically higher than anyone who will ever live. Anyway, thank you so much for sitting through this video. I'm sorry if I bored you with all the psychology stuff. Needless to say, I'm no psychologist, so if I made any factual errors in the video, please insult me in the comments. Okay, that's it for today. Bye.